Stand by. We got Martin Exterior's roof cam taking a look outside. So nice and beautiful out there. We'll have highs into the 80s. Currently temperatures sitting in the 60s, so it still started out feeling pretty fall-like, even though by the time we get to this afternoon, definitely going to feel more like summer. And kind of when you think about fall transition into summer, you know, or excuse me, summer into fall, you're thinking back to school, all the kids sitting there at home, and it gets parents kind of thinking about wills and trusts to protect their kids, or at least should help them think about that. So we got Natalie Barber joining us, Tobin, Ramon and Barber, and that's what we're talking about today, how parents really can protect their kids, guardians, whoever that is, with a will and a trust.
That's right.
It's something people don't typically think about, especially combining that. Right. How does the process work, and kind of why is it important to think about?
Yeah, so a lot of times people will call up my office and say, how much for a will? And it's like, oh, you're asking the wrong question, because it's not, do I need a will or a trust, or how much just for a will, because that's not a full estate plan. It's, do you need a trust in addition to the will? So the will is the document where we make sure the kids are okay.
Okay.
So that's where you name guardians for your children if unfortunately you pass away and you've got minor children. So kids under 18.
Really important to have this. Whether you're a parent yourself or maybe you have a guardianship of a niece, a nephew, whatever that looks like, really important to have that. And if you don't, gotta consider it.
Right, because we don't want everyone fighting in court after this would be an untimely death, for fighting over to make sure whether the kids are okay and who's going to be in charge and what your wishes would have been. You don't want people guessing over that, because that causes very contentious situation that you don't want to deal with.
Yeah. So this helps people think in the long term, but something I am curious about is one parent survival. Is that a consideration if that does happen, that you have that?
Yeah. So your first guardian that you say is, like, if you've got a traditional family, like you're married, you got a couple kids, is spouse, of course. You also have blended families where you may have to have the will be constructed according to like a court order, right? The result of like a divorce or like a paternity suit or something like that. So we still have to follow all the rules of the game, so to speak, if there's previous litigation that sort of informs how we fill out that will.
Yeah, that definitely changes a one-parent survival if you have those different factors.
Yeah, and it's really cool because you can say, okay, my priority is I want my kids in this hypothetical situation to go to a two-parent household.
Yeah.
So I'm going to nominate John and Jane Doe, provided they're both still alive and married to each other. And if that's not the case, okay, to my next backup. Or you may say, no, John and Jane Doe are like my favorite people in the world that I trust. So I'm going to nominate John and Jane Doe or the survivor of them. So we can be really creative with sort of how we stack up the team that could take care of your kids.
How important is it to choose really the right trustee for your family?
So typically you kind of choose, you've got your small circle of people you trust. So for the documents that you use, if you are going to do a trust, you'd have a pour over will that says, here's my name, here's who I'm related to, here are potential guardians for my kids, and they're often the same as your trustees. I pour everything over to my trust. And then in your trust, that's where the magic happens, where you say where you're going to leave stuff, like where it's going to go when you pass away. And with a trust, if you don't add a trust, we can do it all through the will, but then your loved ones are going to have to deal with probate to get the stuff to the people that you want to have your stuff.
And probate is not fun. So a lot of people think,
it's a court case.
Yeah, they think these kind of things when you divvy up assets after your death, it's just your will.
Right.
But it is much more than that. Then I don't think people have that kind of common knowledge of a trust and how they work together.
So if you don't have an estate plan, then a lot of times people call up my office and say, how much for a will? And they think if they get a will, well, now I've done my estate planning and I avoid probate. No, you've done your estate planning, so at least you've made your wishes known. But to unpackage your wishes and do your distribution, we have to do it through the courts with a 6-month timeline. So delays and costs. With a trust, it's kind of like a bypass, like that road, like going around town, right? With a trust, we can bypass all of that probate, all of that litigation, and all that your successor trustee has to do, show the death certificate, and just like taking over a business, they step into your shoes and they can do the things.
Yeah.
So the trustee, the guardian, the executor, typically they're all kind of the same people.
Yeah.
Because if you trust them with your kids and your stuff and your life, then you probably trust them throughout.
To go through that entire process. And I'm sure at that point, you've probably gone through something really tragic and it's just heavy to deal with.
Yeah.
That you don't want to have to deal with something even more challenging in the midst of all that. And that can happen if you're not really thinking ahead with these wills and trusts and the differences.
And you don't have to plan because it's sort of like, well, what's in it for me? Well, it's not free to do a will and a trust, so there's a little bit of a cost, but it's kind of like buying life insurance, right?
Yes.
Like you pay the premium, but you're not seeing the benefit because you're going to be passed away.
Yeah.
It truly is for your loved ones, for your friends and family.
Well, so much more we could talk about. This is some great education. Thank you so much for being here, Natalie, and taking the time. If you have questions yourself or you just are curious now that we've sparked this conversation, go to tobinramon.com. You can also give them a call and they'll be happy to speak with you and help you out with any needs or questions you might have. Thanks again for being here, Natalie. We appreciate it, and we'll be right back.